way of Will John.
Guys, what's going on? We have today Shaun Attwood, who is a former stock market millionaire and ecstasy drug trafficker turned public speaker, author, and activist who is banned from America for life. His story has been featured worldwide numerous times, including on the National Geographic Channel. His writing, which was smuggled out of jail with the highest death rate in America, attracted international media attention to human rights violations like murders by guards and gang members, dead rats in the food, cockroaches crawling in his ears at nights. So while incarcerated, Shaun was forced to assess his life. He's read over 1,000 books in just under 6 years. And by studying original texts in psychology and philosophy, he sought to better understand himself and his past behavior. He now tells his story at schools to put young people off drugs and crime. And he has appeared on the BBC, Sky, CNN, and virtually every channel in the world talking about issues affecting prisoners' rights. Shaun, what a bio. How are you?
Phenomenal, and huge thank you for having me on. I've been reading about you actually, so massive congratulations on your sports success. That is astounding.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I enjoy the game and plenty of other things. I like to be a multifaceted, multi-talented man, which you do as well. You appreciate that that lifestyle. We've got a lot to get into, and like I said beforehand, I'd love to just kind of, if you can, give us a brief on you in that beginning, and we'll start from there and track up.
Yeah, so come from the industrial northwest of England, a tiny little chemical manufacturing town called Widnes in Cheshire. Didn't have much money growing up, but I managed to get some money off my grandmother to invest in the stock market when I was a teenager. I put it into British Telecom shares. It was a new issue, and they doubled on the first day of dealing, so I was hooked. Went down the library, ordered dozens of books on the subject, ordered books on crowd psychology, and I ended up doing my university degree. I had aunts in Arizona, and once I graduated with my university degree, I moved to Arizona and started to work as a stockbroker. And I was really dazzled by Arizona because I had one aunt, and when I visited her when I was a young person, she changed the date of birth of my passport so I was 21, took me out nightclubbing, and was introducing me to all these beautiful American women as Paul McCartney's nephew. So you can imagine the attention I was getting.
Yeah. With the accent and everything, for sure.
Yeah. I was absolutely blown away by Phoenix, Arizona. They rolled out the red carpet when they heard the English accent. You know, I'm just coming from the UK where nobody knows, you know, I'm just a normal person here. And all of a sudden, I'm Paul McCartney's nephew. And the women are attracted to that. And I'm thinking, I want some of this when I finish at university. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's very, the weather, they say there's like all 4 seasons in one day in the UK. Rain, cold, snow in the winter. It's cold right now. And when the plane comes into Arizona and you look out the window and you see all the swimming pools in the backyards, you're like, this is paradise.
Totally. So that's awesome. And so from there, obviously, when you did make that obvious move, how long was it before you were actually swimming in money, that you changed your life? What led to that? Did you have to go to New York to do that? Did that all happen in Arizona? How did that happen?
So when I touched down in Arizona, I was in a race against my student credit cards to make money. And it was a commission-only position that I accepted. They wanted me to do this Series 7 course and then do the test, but I didn't have time to do all that. So I said to the stockbroker boss, who looked like this big mafia guy, I said, look, how hard is this test? He goes, oh, you got to do the class. Oh, I don't, I really need to start making money. And he goes and gets the manual. The manual's like this big. And I'm looking through it. And it was all multiple choice questions. And I said, are you kidding me? Multiple choice questions? I've just done, this degree. It was pages and pages of calculus. I'm quite confident I could do this. But then he was like this big character out of The Sopranos. He's looking at me and he's like, you know what? I've never let anyone do this before, but you seem so sure of yourself. I'm going to let you sit the exam without the test. But I don't like it when people let me down. if people let me down, and kind of like intimating something very bad would happen. And I later learned that he was connected with Italian mafia penny stock outfits. Yeah, yeah. Some real shady characters were visiting the office. Anyways, I passed the test. Even though I passed the test, I still wasn't making any money in my first couple of years because I was no good on the phones. But once I was schooled properly, 5 years in, I was grossing $500 million a year. Got my own staff, secretary, cold callers. But I made the fatal decision. It wasn't the brightest idea in the state of Arizona with such draconian laws to start throwing rave parties for up to 10,000 people at a time and importing ecstasy. It was all going good till Sammy the Bull's crew moved in.
Okay, so tell me about that, because that's obviously something that I've touched on, and I haven't seen you necessarily talk about a whole lot. And I knew that. So at the same time, as you were building up your ecstasy ring and kind of building up that organization, Sammy the Bull at another part of the country, who was a part of the Gambino mob family, I guess is that how they're referred to, had their own ecstasy ring, and you guys were kind of competing for market share, or how did that work? What was going on?
So Sammy the Bull Gravano was the underboss of the Gambino crime family under John Gotti. Him and Gotti were in a conspiracy. They whacked the boss and took over. But then the Bull became the highest ranking member of the mafia in history to cooperate with the feds. So he was offered witness protection, and he said, I ain't going to go to Nebraska on some farm wearing some fake ass beard. And he stayed out in the open. His name was Jimmy Moran. That was his fake name. And he said, if they're coming for me, I've got some surprises for them. So he is a formidable character. But what happened was, I had the rave scene locked down with all the local people for quite a few years. Then all of a sudden, these big steroid head jock characters started to appear peddling pills. And we're like, who are these guys? Now, I had a wife at the time who was bisexual, and one of her girlfriends was dating one of these new ecstasy dealers. So she brokered a meeting with these characters at Heart 5, some nightclub in Tucson. I go up there with one of my guys, Rossetti. He's strapped. I said, look, just watch my back. I don't know who these people are. If they try and kidnap me, just open up on the motherfuckers. And we go into this back room. They clear it. And I'm talking to them. And they're trying to push their pills onto my enterprise. And I say, look, I've got a good reputation for the white and beige presses out of Holland. You guys are pushing these colored pills. Now, colored pills, it doesn't necessarily mean it could be bad, but the beige and the white presses were generally the most reliable. But they have these pink pills, blue pills, and it quite often can indicate that there's some kind of toxic substance in it that's been thrown together with some food coloring. So anyway, they jump the big one. There was a shorter one and there's a massive one. The massive one jumps up off the sofa. Who the hell are you disrespecting our pills? This guy was like 6.5 foot meathead. One call to Sammy the Bull and we can have you taken out to the desert. Now, I was aware of this from the news. Sammy the Bull, co-conspirator up to 19 murders. Are these guys blowing smoke or is this real? I didn't know. But when I left there with my bodyguard and my wife, we were on the drive up. Well, she was unconscious on GHB. She overdosed herself. And on the drive home, discussing this with Rossetti, he's like, yeah, this is getting heavy now when people like that move in. But what happened was the crew, one of the crews working for Gravano, they kidnapped they lured my top ecstasy salesperson into a nightclub in Scottsdale, took him into the men's room under the pretext of doing a deal, smashed his teeth out, took his money, took his drugs. So there was an ongoing struggle with those guys. Now, at that point in time, I legitimately thought, Sammy the Bull was at home, calling the shots, running this ecstasy ring. But it's come out in the last couple of years because I was just in a documentary with him on National Geographic Channel. It's called How He Busted the Bull. I think it's a Narco Wars episode. It's come out that all his involvement was, and this is the primary evidence against him, his son, Gerard Gravano, called him up, there's a recording of this, and asked him for some money. and Sammy the Bull put money into the ecstasy enterprise, but he wasn't aware of what was going on the streets. It was run by Gerard Gravano, and before Gerard, it was Mike Papa's ecstasy ring, and it was Mike Papa who brought Gerard Gravano into it. So they were the ones who knew everything that was going on the streets. Now, for example, I was at a gay bar called the Crowbar in Phoenix, and it got moody one night, and the people I was with were like, really think we should leave? What we didn't know was a striptease dancer had called it in to the Gravanos, and Gerard, with a hit team, was on the way to the club to take me out to the desert. And I asked him later on, I met him in jail, met him in prison later on after we were all sentenced. And he said they were going to hold me for ransom. If the ransom wasn't paid, they were going to, wipe out the competition. So things did get quite heavy with the Gravano crew.
That's insane stuff that that you feel like you only hear out of a movie. And in that time as well, you mentioned, or at least I'd seen mention, that there was either a brush-in or you kind of ended up working with possibly the New Mexican mafia at the same time.
Oh my goodness, yeah. These guys, these were my early protectors. So the reason the criminal organization got established was because my best friend from childhood, wild man, massive guy, like he died not last year but the year before, and he was 29 stone. 1 stone is 14 pounds, and 6'2". So he comes over, and he was a proper maniac, and he opened the door for me into that world. He was constantly throwing house parties in the places that he didn't blow up or set fire to or get kicked out of, and there were several of those. And so one night we're in this apartment complex where Wildman is living, and we're in one of the apartments in the complex. We're at a party, and I'm supplying the ecstasy, and this ruggedly handsome, tall Mexican American walks in. He's got the chains on, he's got the prison tats, and I get talking to him because, we're the dealers. All of a sudden, a cop walks in. The cop says, I could smell weed from outside. Nobody move. And he goes to grab his radio like he was going to call it in. G-Dog just whips his gun out, points at the cop. The only one who's not leaving is you, motherfucker. Everybody run. We all run off into the night. I've never seen anything this heavy before. Yeah, I'm on drugs, and that's, giving me some false bravery. We hide out in another apartment in that complex and debating what to do. We're shitting ourselves. Should we flush our drugs? Are we all going to get busted? All of a sudden, bam, 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 bam on the French window. And it's the Mexican-American guy, G-Dog. We let him in. And he schooled us right away, just like the New Mexican Mafia schooled me later on certain things. And he said, look, turn the lights off, turn the TV off, no one make a sound. They knock on the door. They can't have got a warrant that quick. They don't know which apartment we're in. We should be okay. Apartment complex got flooded. Helicopters, police cars, everything. They knocked on the door. We did as he said, and they went on to the next door and the next door and the next door. And when it had chilled out later that night, by chilled out, I mean most of the police presence is gone. There was one car at the front of the complex. I said to him, you're too hot in this area. Why don't I take you to a house I've got in Phoenix? So I took him to a house I had in Phoenix. We shot some pool. And in the following, in the aftermath of that, he said, look, Shaun, because you and your friends protected me that night, me and my brothers have got your back. I had no idea what that meant. None whatsoever. A couple months later, he says, one of my brothers wants to meet you. Go over to his house in Tempe. They got all the lowrider showcase cars on the road. And we knock on the door. His brother's a shorter guy, no hair, got the little wife beater vest on, stocky, tough looking guy looking up at me like, who the F is this guy? And then he hears my English accent and he relaxed a bit. He was like, damn, you talk funny. I guess you are from England. Come in and meet my homies. So I go in to meet these homies. Big old room. They've got like weighing slabs, crystal meth, slabs of coke, all kinds of weapons. And I'm looking around the room. Biggest TV I've ever seen. Next to it is a tiny TV showing all the comings and goings on the street so they can see a raid coming. But when I looked at the big TV, I had to do a double take. I thought, hold on a minute, I've seen one of those in a movie. I think it was Rambo. It's definitely not an ornament. They had a rocket-propelled grenade launcher on top of the TV. Yes, and the biggest one swings a spoonful of coke in my face. Snort this. I look at G-Dog. Yeah, snort it. So they were, the brother obviously heard my accent. He thinks I'm not a cop, but you got to take some drugs in their presence to prove more that you're not a cop, because the laws about that are quite strict, even though they have told some cops now they can get high with people. So I snort the coke and go and discuss business with the brother. And I didn't know who they were. I was in business with them at that house for a few years, until one night I took G-Dog home. Well, not home, because he wasn't there, to his brother's house. And the whole neighborhood was blacked out. They had cops on the streets with light wands guiding the traffic. And as we pulled up to the house, a federal SWAT team was bringing them all out in handcuffs. We almost got caught up in that SWAT team raid. But the headline news that night was, these are the heads of the New Mexican mafia in Arizona. And it showed all the mugshots of all the people I've been doing business with. It said they were the most dangerous mafia organization in Arizona at that time. They tried to assassinate the head of the Department of Corrections. They were trying to assassinate judges. They'd been assassinating witnesses, police, and on and on and on and on it went. So I was blown away, Every time I went to that house, I always felt like I got to get out of here fast. It was always so moody. They always looked at me like, I didn't belong there. But I did get them all high on ecstasy one night, and they were all hugging me to death and telling me their life stories.
So that's where I want to go too, because I'm curious. Like, it's very rare that you talk to someone that has actually lived a life like that and within that world, and then come out of it, to where you are. So my question that I have written down here is, what is the daily life like of an ecstasy trafficker or someone who's doing this? Is it really very simple? Is it do you need to do one thing once a day, and then you're just kind of like, living on eggshells, or how does that work? What's it like?
All right, so you've probably seen the trajectory of movies like Goodfellas, Blow, Narcos.
Sure.
It begins with the glitz, the glamour, the sex, the parties, the drugs, the excess. Then you start to see the competition come in as a threat. You start to see the undercover cops come in as a threat. By this point, your own decision-making faculties are completely scrambled by the drugs you're taking. And there's a downward slope that you think you can reverse, but you never can. So at the peak of mine, before the fall came, I was living in $1 million house on the side of a mountain in Tucson. The neighborhood was called what was it called? The Catalina Foothills. 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 was the neighborhood. A few miles down the mountain range was Paul McCartney, actually, speaking of the Beatles. And one of my neighbors in the 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 community was Bill Bonanno Sr., the longest running head of the Mafia Council, had been run out of New York and gone into retirement in Tucson. This was an absolutely beautiful, stunning view of the valley. And I'd go to the mailbox and there'd be deer around the mailbox. There's all kinds of lizards. We had a swimming pool, jacuzzi. And when there was a monsoon storm, the lightning would bounce down the slope, sometimes off the top of our house. And the rain would form a little stream and a waterfall right by the house. And I had this, I had a wild wife back then. She was doing lesbian internet porn when I met her. She was very well educated. She had a university degree. And her thing was, when the thunder and lightning came, was to go and have sex on the lawn.
Wow.
Well, that was one of her many things, actually.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Okay, so good start. Everything you would assume that everything is going well, and then things start to go down. So to transition out of this, then tell us what happened when you got hit, and now to the jail part. What happened the day you got busted, or how did you get busted exactly?
All right, so Sammy the Bull's crew got busted about a year or so before me, as did the New Mexican Mafia guys. That was 2 or 3 years before me. When they busted Sammy the Bull's crew, I was thinking, yeah, thank you, cops. You just wiped out my competition. But then I had heads up from a lawyer who's had let's say a family member in the DEA. that they were hot for me now. Those resources that were pointed on the bull were getting pointed at me. And I met a woman as well who I fell in love with. And she said, this is really dangerous. She's like, your friends are really sketchy. You know, they're always talking about doing this and that and blah, blah, blah. I'm scared. And if you love me, you'd move away from all this. So we got a place together where no one knew where we lived. I quit the importation of the ecstasy and I thought I got away with it. However, I was naive to the statute of limitations. They don't need to catch you with the drugs. All it takes is someone from your past to tell the cops you've done a drug deal with them within a 7-year period, and they've got a case, which is what happened in my case. There's a long story of actually my top ecstasy salesperson fell out with 𝗪𝗛𝗟, and he was in fear of his life so much that he actually went to the police. So he was the main person who got the grand jury indictment going. So the grand jury indictment came down. The cops were authorized to start raiding everybody. It was May 16th, 2002. I was on my computer trading the stock market. I was going to the gym, and things like that, kickboxing and trying to be healthy and get out of all that former lifestyle. And then just bam, 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 bam on the door. So I jump up from the computer, look through the peephole, and it's blacked out. Tempe Police Department, we got a warrant, open your door. I'm wondering, is it really the cops or is it drug dealer robbers pretending? I hear all these boots thudding up the outdoor stairs to the apartment. Bam, 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 bam. I look out the window. Oh, man, the whole complex is surrounded. Police cars, marksmen, SWAT team, everything. I go through to the bedroom then to my girlfriend. We're like, what are we going to do about let them in? We're walking through the living room. We get halfway through the living room, then just boom, door flies off the hinges, bounces off the wall, all this. We're like, holy shit. Then they just all come in. Hands above your heads, don't fucking move now, get on the fucking ground right now. Ah! And you just see their eyes, the intensity of their eyes behind those protective visors. And if they open up on you at that moment, your life is over in seconds. So it all went in slow motion. I'm describing it here like that, like this. The second lasted a long time, but it didn't. It was just a pure second. Because as soon as you see those eyes and hear them yelling at you, you just drop. And then the detective that I later learned from all the police work was my nemesis, just yanked me up by the cuffs, gets in my face. He's like, English Shaun, we've finally got you. You're a big name from the rave scene. He was just so happy. In the police paperwork later on, I learned that he was, going in all these restaurants. I'd be in an Indian restaurant, he'd be sat on the table next to me, listening to me, and things like that.
Wow.
He showed up at all of my court appearances. He showed up at all of them. Oh yeah,
Wow.
Big time nemesis through that cop. Yeah.
So in the end, you were sentenced to 9 years, correct? You ended up serving 6 total.
Yeah. So I ended up getting the lawyer that the New Mexican mafia told me to get if I was ever in serious trouble, and he was a loophole lawyer. Now, cost 6 figures, I think, low 6 figures but and I didn't have money either. It was my parents had to remortgage the house. But if it wasn't for this lawyer, I'd probably still be in prison, because over 100 people were arrested, only 4 cooperated, which was really good. All 57 in Sammy the Bull's case cooperated. So they had a very weak case against me. There was no drugs. There was only 4 people cooperating. My lawyer said basically with the wiretaps, because they'd only been in the last year and I'd quit the importation, they didn't catch me doing any big deals. My lawyer said they've completely missed the boat. However, due to the nature of all of my charges, in the beginning, I was facing, they slapped serious drug offender status on me, which carries 25 to life. And I had about 12 felonies. And if I'd have gone to trial, they could stack them if you go to trial. So that's maximum sentence times 10. So 100 years plus the 25, 125. But in the second year, they doubled my bail bond and slapped another 10 plus charges on me. So at the peak of it, I was facing a 200-year sentence. And even though they didn't have much evidence against me, to roll the dice, and these prosecutors, the dirty tricks are absolutely mind-blowing. And to get a jury, and I had actually done the things that they were saying I'd done, but they just couldn't prove it properly. So I thought it was good when that lawyer, the New Mexico Mafia lawyer, got me a plea bargain for 9.5 years. And as a first-time non-violent drug offender who was not a US citizen, he slipped this half-time release loophole in for non-US citizens, whereby I would only have to serve 5.75 years. So getting sentenced to 9.5 years after facing 200 was one of the happiest days of my life.
I bet. I've heard a snippet of you describing what went on in prison, and what that was like. But there was a story that makes me, I mean, just the cockroach story, and the fact I've got it. You've got to explain to me what this was really like, and where, because you started off in a medium security and it got transferred to a maximum security.
Medium security towers, my first year. Second year, the maximum security Madison Street jail.
All right. And so from there, it was that in the maximum security, and is there a massive difference between a medium and maximum security? Does things just completely drop off, or?
There's all right, so we're talking about Sheriff Joe Arpaio's House of Horrors now. This guy was the architect of a jail system called the Maricopa County Jail System, whereby National Geographic, when they researched my Locked Up Abroad episode, they said about, I think it's 62 people died over a 5-year period around the time I was there. Some of them were mentally ill prisoners murdered by the guards. Some of them were people murdered by gang members, like Aryan Brotherhood members. And I had videos of all of this as well on my channel, but we had to take them down. So Brian Crenshaw, he was a partially blind shoplifter. They brought him in. The guards started beating him to death and tasering him. And a female guard tried to stop it. She goes, "Stop beating him. His face has turned blue." They pushed her off. They kept beating him. The inmates started yelling, "Why are you still beating him? He's already dead." And even with the inmates yelling that, they continued to beat the corpse. And it's like this wolf pack part of the brain had been activated in these people because they could not stop even though this guy was dead. This is how brutal that place was, and it comes down from the top because Sheriff Joe Arpaio prided himself on being America's toughest sheriff. It was chain gangs, black and white outfits, stripes, pink underwear, green bologna sandwiches for breakfast. He's boasting that the meals, it's all this rotten food, and it costs him less than 50 cents per day to feed each prisoner the rotten food. But you lose a hell of a lot of weight in there. People were starving. There was food poisonings. There was all kinds of medical stuff going on. And they don't want to treat you because it costs some money. I saw people with cancer. They give them an aspirin, say, "Have a nice day, stop whining, go back to your cell." So it was an absolute house of horrors. And I'm not trying to be a whiner here. I take full responsibility for running my ecstasy ring. And I deserve to go in there and go through that. And people think, well, pedophiles, serial killers, rapists, murderers, this is what they deserve. And I agree, because that's what I thought prisoners were as well. And guess what? I got in there and the average arrest was like a black kid or a Mexican kid with a bit of a weed getting a 2 to 5 year sentence. At the height of the war on drugs, the highest arrest category in the history of criminal justice was weed possession. And they were getting big sentences because they'd had a prior conviction, so they can just compound your sentence. I learned that jail was the biggest houser of the mentally ill. A third of them couldn't even read or write. They're thrown away as kids, raised on the street, seen their parents die, got molested. So many of them had been abused as kids. So they'd been traumatized, hadn't given the tools to deal with it, got on street drugs to self-medicate PTSD, and then to finance that addiction, which gets bigger and bigger, the men, they rob, they deal, they steal cars. The women, they shoplift, they get into sex work. And on my own podcast, interviewing so many prisoners, it's the same story over and over. It's sad that society doesn't address this issue. Rather, they let it get into the crime level whereby these people can cause mayhem on society, and then they're commoditized and warehoused human beings for profits of the private prison companies, which are getting tens of billions a year right now in contracts. So it was when I got moved over to maximum security when I entered the Cockroach Hotel. It was about 2 a.m. when I walk in, and it's dark, but there's some light slanting in from the day room. First thing I notice, it's a 2-man cell. That's an improvement. But I'm wondering why my cellmate, who I later learned was a crystal meth chemist, was asleep on the top bunk. Because where I come from, people fight over the bottom bunk. So I thought something's not quite right here. So there's a weird movement on the walls. I'm not sure what it is. Something drops off the ceiling and bounces off my shoulder. I'm like, what the fuck was that? So I put my face right up to the wall to see what's going on. And it's covered in these guys. Yeah.
So
I got used to the violence, but trying to get sleep with these crawling on me gave me a nervous breakdown. I had to get put on medication. The reason my cellmate was asleep on the top bunk was because of the brackets on the wall holding my bunk to the wall had massive holes. And the cockroaches were just pouring out of them onto the bunk where I was supposed to try and get to sleep. So I did wrap the sheet around me because that does keep them off you, but it's almost 50-degree heat and you've got all these bleeding and itching skin infections and bed sores because there's no air. You're being cooked alive all day long. You're stinking like a wet dog. It looked like a spilt battery acid on my leg from these sores. And the trapped heat, you're like the mummy with a little breathing hole, but then the trapped heat makes you so unbearably itchy you can't possibly sleep. So you just throw the sheet off and you gotta get used to these guys crawling on you.
Oh my God.
Otherwise you're gonna go
Never.
insane. And I couldn't sleep for night after night. I couldn't sleep when they're crawling on me. They're tickling my face, my hands, my feet. Even to this day, if someone tickles my hands, I flinch. I woke up so many nights. They try to get in your ears to eat your earwax. It's like honey to them. I had a neighbor who's asthmatic, wakes up one morning out of breath, grabs his inhaler, shoots a live cockroach inside himself, starts freaking out saying he can feel it moving around, throws up and it's stuck inside him and it won't even come out. Yeah, so anyway, because I was fighting my case for so long, because I wouldn't bow down and sign a plea bargain or cooperate, the conditions got worse and worse, and I was in the Cockroach Hotel for 14 months. This is how they try and break you down psychologically.
I see. Okay.
And I just learned to adapt to be in harmony with the cockroaches. I had 2 tubes of Amerifresh toothpaste, which the sheriff was giving us, which years later came out was coming over from China and was poison. It had some kind of antifreeze poison in it that we were brushing our teeth with. But I was using it to cement the cracks in the walls. And I remember one time my cell smelled minty fresh and I was so proud because they could only get under the door now. They couldn't get in the walls or near the bracket for the bunk. And then all of a sudden over the intercom, Atwood, roll up. Cell 9, roll up, which means you got to get all your shit, your mattress, you got to your bedding, everything. You roll it all up, your towel, and you're getting moved to another part of the jail. And I got moved to one of the most cockroach-infested parts of the jail. I had no toothpaste. They were just everywhere. They were everywhere. But this is how my journey got discovered. I started writing all this down in letters to my family. They said, maybe we should start a blog because blogs were something new back then. I think it was the first jail blog that we did. And my aunt smuggled my writing out of the max security, Madison Street Jail, sent them to my parents in England by email. They typed them up. They posted them online as a blog called John's Jail Journal because they didn't want it to be in the name of Shaun, but Shaun is John's Irish for Shaun. So it was trying to expose the conditions in the hope things would get improved for the guys. The media jumped on it and the jail conditions were improved. That jail was actually closed down. And it led to me becoming an author. My life story is a trilogy: Party Time, Hard Time, Prison Time. Hard Time's got all the cockroach stuff in it. And a YouTuber. And I just feel so blessed that I'm not in the grind anymore, at 6 o'clock in the morning, sales meeting, stock market office. I'm doing a job I love. I get to speak to such interesting and successful people as yourself. I get to interview all these amazing podcast guests on my own true crime podcast. So I'm loving life. I feel like I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life.
I mean, that is the true, turnaround story if I've ever heard one. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like. I mean, my only even not even remotely comparable experience was being in Mexico in Guadalajara, and yeah, we and this is as a kid, right? I think I was 14 with the U.S. national team, so the under 14 national team going down to play some Mexican teams and the Mexican national team and stuff like that, and we fell asleep. We also arrived late at what was kind of a resort place, and was truly actually pretty nice, but it just hadn't been taken care of. And there was just at the top of the thing when we woke up, just spiders, just of like you couldn't imagine. And one guy's leg, like you said, just these things sores. I don't know how he didn't wake up because when we woke up, his leg didn't look like a leg anymore, right? It looks like some sort of red, yeah, insane, insane to be there, just in that little period. But while you were there in while you were there in prison, you read some books. And I'm curious if you could, because a lot of the people listening to this will be, I mean, we've plenty of young guys. So I still have one backtrack question before we continually go forward. But this one would be, what three books, if you could pick three books out of there, and obviously it could be more, transformed you that you could recommend that would push guys to get the best out of themselves? Because I mean, clearly all the things you went through, you kind of had some misaligned skills that you're putting in some places you probably shouldn't have, and that ended up, getting you there. You clearly have a drive and ambition to do something for yourself. You're very industrious. So is there any of these books that you would recommend that changed you in a way?
Definitely. So prisoners are going through hard times. Anything can happen in there, and they need to have strong mental discipline if they're going to get through it. Sadly, the stress is so much, and the big sentences are so much that the majority are taking heroin, so they don't have to think about those sentences and those conditions and never getting out. But if you want to get through it sober, I would recommend, and for anyone going through anything in life, I would recommend the whole genre of Stoic philosophy. Have you seen the movie The Gladiator?
It's been a long time, but yeah,
Do you remember the old Roman emperor at the beginning, Marcus Aurelius?
of course, yeah.
He wrote that book. What was it? Meditations?
I've got it right here. I've got it right here.
Yeah. So he said, be like the rock jutting into the sea, and the sea is the storm of everyday life. And those waves may be crashing down upon you, but you're maintaining equanimity. So, as you well know, that is an all-time classic. Have you read Epictetus?
No.
So I think Epictetus was a slave who was freed. He became a teacher. And he said things like, we are disturbed not by what's going on around us, but by the reaction we choose to have towards it. So he laid the whole foundation for cognitive behavioral therapy and REMT and all those other psychotherapies. Because it's true. I mean, you saw in prison that the guys who were getting picked on the most were the guys who were reacting the most. So what you see in prison is the guys who are getting picked on the most are the guys who react the most. But according to Epictetus, someone could jump in your face and say, I'm going to kill your entire family and then I'm going to kill you. But you could choose your reaction to it. You could think this guy's mentally ill, he's having a bad day, and just walk away from the situation, not engage that person's negative energy. So, yeah, you asked for two books then. So, Aurelius Meditations, Epictetus, and Robert Greene. Now, I finally interviewed Robert Greene after reading these works many, many years ago, a decade and a half ago now. I interviewed him just last month, actually, and it was supposed to last for an hour. It lasted for 2 hours, and it was so fascinating. He's such a lovely guy. And people say, look, we read Robert Greene, it makes us paranoid. This is sneaky shit. What good could come of this? But it's not, because you've got to be aware, if you're going to become successful, of the pitfalls. And there are sharks out there who will throw these tricks upon you, and you will fall into their traps. And I was reading this stuff, I was thinking, oh my God, if I'd only known that when this thing had happened in my life over and over again. And then you read books like Mastery, master yourself, know thyself. People think success is external, but it's not. It's in here. I have had runs of success and have self-destructed because up here had not been addressed. My demons were running wild. But once you get into the meditation, the yoga, the self-discipline, the introspection, you're going to make more healthy decisions. And if success isn't your goal, isn't financial success, you're going to make healthy decisions in every area of your life, whether it's your love life, whether it's your family relations, whatever it is that makes you happy and you define as the meaning of life. It's all going to improve.
So true. I mean, it's a huge thing that we stress, and we've had very interesting people on as well to talk about it. But in we just recently had a guy named Jim Aframo who works with these high level, NFL, NBA, Golden State Warriors, all these top level teams, to speak about the fact that the difference is not in you being able to bench press an extra 50 pounds. It's these guys have figured out the internal world. They understand that self-discipline, whether they use visualization or meditation, any of those things, those are the things that are giving the best out of themselves. And so it obviously doesn't have to be if you have a financial goal or whatever it is. It's that part inside is a thing. So it's actually really fascinating that of all the books that you've read, the ones that are built and based around a Stoic lifestyle, which is huge. I mean, I love a lot of the Stoic. I mean, I think Seneca. I think I also have Seneca's book, and I can't. The title is escaping me right now. Maybe on the shortness of life, I think it might be called. But brilliant stuff.
Well, Marcus Aurelius says we're just from dust and we're going back to dust. So make the most of it. Look at the miracle of your own existence. And people are, complaining about so many things. Like you get out of prison and walking down the high street and being able to buy a banana was like the heights of ecstasy for me. Of course, that doesn't last, but I've not gone quite back to where I was, where you're just taking everything for granted. See the beauty in the small things, and you won't go looking for trouble in the wrong places.
That's a huge thing. And I was gonna ask about. I was going to take it back to your stockbroker days, but I'm actually too curious now because of the writing that you started to do while in prison that led to you writing about Pablo Escobar. You've written some books on Bill Clinton, the Clinton family, and the Bush family, as well as more recently, everyone is aware of the Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trial and stuff like that. So how did you transition into that, and what did you uncover from writing about Pablo Escobar? I mean, obviously you had some parallels and you had a unique outlook, I would say, than the average person. What did you find out?
So I was learning to write in prison, and thank goodness my girlfriend, the relationship didn't last, but she kept all of my letters to her shoved under her bed. So I got this huge FedEx box when I got out of prison, like this big, of all these letters, because all the details in hard time and prison time, there's no way I would have remembered that stuff years later. So that was the foundation for my life story. I was learning to write, and it took me 10 years to put that trilogy together. Random House picked it up, and I was over the moon. But even though it was selling quite good, the minuscule amount of royalties I was getting, it wasn't enough to have an income that you could live off. So I thought to myself, you need to write about something more important than yourself, and perhaps maybe the sales will jump. And I thought, all right, who is the biggest character in true crime right now? It's Pablo Escobar. And I knew a Mexican cartel. He wasn't a Mexican guy; he was an American guy, but he flew huge loads for the original Mexican cartel. He was working under, Felix Gallardo and Caro Quintero. He worked with all those guys, and he told me all the ins and outs of the business and the government's involvement, which led to my books I've written like Clinton, Bush, and CIA conspiracies, because My thing was I set the blog out to deconstruct the Arizona jail system and raise awareness. And then the next thing I wanted to deconstruct was the war on drugs. So it was a natural progression. And the war on drugs led me to the Clinton crime family. How can you have presidents in office, such as George H.W. Bush, who are fighting a war on drugs while simultaneously have authorized the importation of cocaine into Arkansas through pilot Barry Seal as one example? I've written a book about him called American Made. And then you've got Governor Bill Clinton providing the security for the CIA operation through the Arkansas State Troopers. And this isn't conspiracy. All this has come out from the troopers and the people close to the Clintons who have survived, if they're not on the hashtag Clinton body count. And there was even a moment where George H.W. Bush hosted a dinner, and someone said to him, "How are you getting away with this? You know, Oliver North bringing the cocaine in, Felix Rodriguez, all CIA bringing the cocaine in through Arkansas. How are you getting away with this while running the war on drugs? You are posing with shipments of cocaine while bringing it in." And you know what he said? He said, the reality of that is so far from the public's comprehension of what is possible, they would never, ever believe that anyone would be doing that. It's so far removed from their reality that someone would be doing that. So they will never, ever cop on to what I'm doing.
And that's what I've found. I mean, if anyone who is still, and obviously trust in the mainstream media has gone way down in the last years. However, you will still find people hard pressed to have done some research on what the deep state, what that means, the corruption that might be possibly happening in your government, and how many of your heroes, you might want to call, could be connected. Obviously, possibly it's clearly possible that not everyone is in on it, but it is without a doubt, and not a conspiracy, and well proven fact, the CIA's involvement in the drug trafficking, and that is still not an everyday occurrence. I understand that that CNN or Fox is not just going to constantly have that on the news. What can we more or less consider, or what do you consider to be truth within the Clinton Bush? If you could give us a timeline or just some bullet points on what it is that we can say these people have a finger in drugs, they have a finger in the corruption of this X, Y, and Z. Because I think it's hard for people to kind of visualize, because there's a lot of nonsense out there, and there's a lot of people screaming about this or whatever. And what do you feel confident proving throughout your research that you feel we could tack onto them?
So if people are skeptical about this, I urge them to read Compromise by Terry Reid, who flew with Barry Seal and worked for the CIA and was unaware of the cocaine stuff when he signed up. And when he found out about it in Mexico, the CIA tried to kill him. They destroyed him, incarcerated him, and he got through it all and wrote that book. And he was exposing Clinton, but then the big media operations backed Clinton and put out these news stories saying that this guy was a quack. So that's how they destroy the truth from coming out. But the Clinton crime family, because they provided the state security to the CIA operation, that's why the Clintons were awarded the White House.
Uh-huh.
And Larry Nichols, who was working for ADFA, Arkansas Development Finance Authority, which was purported to be bringing business and jobs to Arkansas, but was actually a money laundering scheme run by Bill and Hillary Clinton, because to get a loan from there, which you didn't have to repay, you first had to put your application through the Rose law firm where Hillary Clinton was working. So this just goes on and on and on. And there's just so much testimonies from the survivors, not conspiracy theorists. I mean, David Icke does have a lot to say on this. I've interviewed him 4 times now. Uh-huh. But he says the reason these guys are in power is because they're psychopaths. The people at the bottom of politics, the well-meaning politicians, are not allowed to rise. It's the psychopaths that get to the top. So if they are bringing drugs in while locking hundreds of thousands of people up for taking the same drugs, and bear in mind, Bill Clinton locked up a record amount of women, hundreds of thousands of women, non-violent drug offenders, untold amounts of low-level drug offenders never seen before, ramping up the war on drugs, filling the private prisons, tens of billions a year in contracts. It's absolutely sickening. And this is a guy whose cocaine problem was so big, he was hospitalized for septal nasal damage. And Hillary went down there and basically told the staff, you tell anyone about this, you will never work again for the rest of your lives.
When was this too? When this is
This
before
was
when he was
this
governor?
was when Bill Clinton was the governor of
Oh,
Arkansas.
wow.
He was running
Okay.
around. His brother got busted by an undercover cop buying cocaine, Roger Clinton, and he said on the tape to the undercover cop, some of this is for Bill. He's got a nose like a vacuum cleaner. Bill had multiple sexual assaults settled against him from that
As
period of
governor.
his life.
Wow.
From that period of his life. And those women signed non-disclosure agreements. And do you remember when Donald Trump brought them all to the debate with Hillary? And they were all sat there. They couldn't say anything because of the non-disclosure agreements, but they were all
That
sat
was the
there.
wow. Wow.
These people are corrupt to the core.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So where does that put? Because you haven't really necessarily mentioned Bush, his involvement. I know that
George H.W. Bush,
wait, sorry, who's the father?
the
The father's
father.
is he the George H.W. and who's what is he?
Yeah.
George. What's the son? What's George?
Yeah,
What's
W.
his middle? Is he just George W? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all confusing because George Bush was, I remember senior, whatever. He was president when I was quite young. I think I was in like fourth grade when he was president, if I remember right. But
And they justified it because there was a domino theory that if the coke got into the hands of the communists in South America and Central America, all those countries would fall to communism, and then would be on next thing the communists would be at the American border. So as long as right-wing death squad cocaine producers were supplying the coke, that was okay because they were fighting the communists. So you got guys, the guys who took out Escobar, the Castaño brothers, they were backed by the Americans, but they got to take over Escobar's cocaine business. But that was okay because they were taking out Escobar, and Escobar was the bogeyman of the war on drugs.
wow. So how does that transition? Because it's a crazy web of things. How and where do you see then Epstein's role in how all this, the intelligence agencies and all this? I mean, everything is technically connected in some sort of
And
way.
it's because it's connected is how I arrived at it. So
Okay.
I'm deconstructing the war on drugs.
Sure.
I write my Pablo Escobar series of books, Cali Cartel book, American Made Barry Seal. Barry Seal, his dream was to have a southern air transport type of operation over Mexico. So he was, bringing stuff up from South America, Nicaragua. It was weapons that were going down there, and cocaine was coming back out. But he wanted, once all the operations finished, with Terry Reid, to have a southern air transport type operation over Mexico. But what happened was the CIA was getting outed by Gary Webb, and Gary Webb then caused the CIA to have to investigate itself. And when the CIA was investigating itself, Southern Air Transport was moved to Ohio by none other than Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner.
Wow. Okay.
So that brought me to Epstein and all the human trafficking stuff, and all that blew up it started to blow up in the news, and my channel became the tip of the spear for exposing these super predators. But because it did, campaigns were started against me, which culminated in my entire channel getting terminated twice, among the many other horrendous things that happened that year.
Wow. This was 2019 or 2020 or
So my channel got terminated twice last year.
last year, 2021.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Then where does that put Epstein in as a story? If you could plot us just an understanding. I mean, we've even mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell, who's still, I think the sentencing has been pushed all the way back until like June, and there's the idea of a mistrial now because of a juror hanging in the in the wind there. But if you could give us a synopsis, because everybody pretty much wants to know, where did Epstein get his money? Who was he exactly? And Ghislaine Maxwell, who is she? What does she know? Where are the tapes? And I know for people who aren't familiar with the story, if you aren't, where have you been? But the other question is, in our last just little section here, is it possible that you could give us an idea of who, any conclusion that you think you've drawn on him?
All right, so it is. All right, so I've written a book called "Who Killed Epstein," and the subtitle is Prince Andrew or Bill Clinton, actually. and I'm just trying to think of all your questions because there were so many you threw at me at once. So one of them was, where did the money
Yeah.
come from? Look at the property then that Wexner gave Epstein for $1. That multi-million-dollar property that already had cameras in it prior to Epstein moving in there. This was an intelligence agency honey trap operation. And 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗪, one of the brave survivors, I interviewed her, and she said that Leslie Wexner was the head of the snake for that operation. Then you've got the mutual fund manager who gave Epstein, what was it, 150 million or something like that, and said it was just for financial fees. So you've got all these massive names, global, powerful people that have given Epstein up to hundreds of millions with no apparent explanation. None of them have
Are
given.
we to believe, though, that sorry to interrupt, but are we to believe that they had been blackmailed into doing so, or that they were complicit in part of an other greater intelligence ring?
Well, there's no proof, is there? So it's all speculation because it's been contained.
Sure.
It was it Leon Black? Yeah, Leon Black. Let me just have a look at this a minute. He
Sure.
gave Epstein 158 million, and he's claiming this was for tax advice, art transactions, and the management of his yacht. 158 million. Can you believe this? That's just one example.
No.
So we will never
Sure.
know what that money was really given to him for because it's all been contained.
Mhm.
You know, the fix was in for Maxwell. Her lawyers have just milked her like crazy. She had 5 bail bond hearings, which were completely unnecessary. She should have been told to take a plea bargain, but to maximize your profits, if you're a lawyer, you want your client to go to trial, and she had a 20 plus million treasure chest for legal fees. So she just got milked by her lawyers. She just got made the fall guy for the public wrath of all this trafficking that's gone on. And all of the big names are still out there and will never be held to account. But God bless Virginia, because Virginia has slayed the monster, as in the Queen's favorite son. She's brought him to her knees.
That is quite
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he is out. He's on the outs. It looks
Yeah.
like it doesn't look like there's a way back for him now, and it does seem,
We filmed at that house where that happened. We got him to open the door,
really.
and one of my co-hosts, Matthew Steeples, has just released a photograph, never been released before, of the bathtub and the bathroom, because their defense was that room and the bathtub were too small to have sex in, and he's just released this photo in the last week, and it's a perfectly normal large bathtub.
Size.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So you got all these super predators out there who are off the hook, and nothing will ever happen to the Queen's favorite son except for he's been deplatformed, disgraced,
Banished,
and
kind of.
yeah,
Yeah.
even the Queen stripped him of HRH.
Right. Then yeah. As a last question, I would just say, who was he in your eyes? To the best, I mean, clearly it's still speculation. Who was he working for? That is a question that I think people are all, and it's obviously not entirely clear. There's been ideas that he was working with Mossad through, Ghislaine Maxwell's possible father, or how that happened, and obviously working with American intelligence agencies, or what in God's name he was doing all cuddled up with scientists and the science community. I don't know what that's about, but if you had to put a pin on where he fell in the map, number one, my question would be, who is he really? And number two, is he at the top, or is he just a middle man? And there's way worse? Is there stuff way worse than what we're
Yeah,
seeing?
one of the people I interviewed was Whitney Webb, and she goes on about how these honey trap intelligence agency operations have been around for decades, and shutting Epstein down was just shutting one little thing down of a giant octopus. So sadly, this is going on all over the world to this day. And you asked me a lot of questions at once again. Then can you just
No,
do
it
one
was
at a
just
time?
it just yeah, just who
Who was he? He was
who
a taxi
was
driver. He was a school teacher who realized he could do high-end scams, such as the Towers Financial one, and then parlayed that money because his co-defendant took the fall for that one, and then parlayed that money into the honey trap thing. And you asked about the scientists and even Prince Andrew. So if you're a convicted pedophile, how do you flex? You flex by surrounding yourself with the most famous, prestigious, royal, powerful people in the world. If he's a convicted pedophile and Prince Andrew's still willing to hang out with him, what does that signal to the rest of the world when this guy's trying to run scams on all of these high-end people? So that's how he kept his reputation intact.
insane. I obviously could go on forever and ever, but this is perfect as an introduction into all of these topics. We've talked about so much. So where can guys find stuff out for you? Where can they find your books? We'll obviously link to everything down below.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we've had a lot of people subscribe to the YouTube channel, so thanks to the subscribers. All my books are worldwide on Amazon, audio book, ebook, paperback. Just put my name in, Shaun Attwood, SHAUN Wood, and I'm on all the socials just under my name as well.
Awesome. Guys, go check that stuff out. We will leave links to everything. Go check out his channel and listen and educate yourself. That's I would say one of the biggest things that you can do, as I would consider that more of your civic duty than just blindly, possibly someone telling you to vote and you just choosing. I think you need to educate yourself thoroughly, and that means taking in sources that aren't just the mainstream media, because I think self-critical analysis will do more for the society than just blindly following anything. So, Shaun, once again, thanks a whole lot for coming. This has been awesome. We'll have to do it again.
Huge thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.